his legacy is what a single individual can do to affect the course of politics.
When we think of Medicare for Canada, we think of Alan McEachran.
Minimum wage, old age security, labor standards legislation, all of these things that sort of affect people's day-to-day lives have Alan Jay's fundamental fingerprints all over them.
His style was graceful, his manner was collaborative, but don't let that fool you. He possessed a steely toughness that could not be shaken.
It is important that we all remember and remind our future generations a simple lesson Alan Jay taught us. Just because you come from a small town doesn't mean you can't do big things. But whatever you do and wherever you go, never forget where you come from.
Alan J. McEachran was born in Inverness, Cape Breton in 1921. He was the son of a coal miner and a homemaker and was a child during the Great Depression. He lost siblings to an epidemic and battled health problems of his own. It was his difficult upbringing that shaped Alan Jay's political drive. Here's an excerpt from his memoirs. My parents lost their 3 firstborn children, Johnny, Flora Jane, and Mary Tina. Tragically, Flora was 7, Mary Jane 3, and Johnny 7 as well, when they were killed in epidemics. The doctors could do nothing. Their graves are in Mabou, but sadly my parents were buried in Inverness, away from their lost children. I never had the chance to ask them why. Regardless, we all blamed the doctor, and my mother never fully recovered from this loss. As was typical of the many mining towns in Nova Scotia at the time, most miners and their families lived in houses rented from the coal company. Barely adequate space, electricity, and running water were the amenities. Outside toilets, ash piles, and a lack of central heating were the downsides. I hated the cold, I still do. When I first attended St. FX in Antigonish, the sound of the heat coursing through the radiators in the early morning was a sweet sound to my ears. Alan McEachran entered public life with a mission to change Canada. He had a vision of a full and abundant life for everyone. And of his long list of achievements, the Medicare Act of 1966 was his greatest. The truth is, there is rarely a single source for a great idea. But as a minister responsible for the Medicare legislation, I had a special role and responsibility that I remain so very proud of. I took on the task with enthusiasm and conviction. What I did not foresee, however, was what a political hot potato I had been handed, and the anger, frustration, and disappointment I would experience along the way. In urging early legislative action, I had focused on external enemies of Medicare, the provinces and the Canadian Medical Association. It was only later that I realized that my most difficult opponents were within the cabinet. I was adamant in my opposition to any attempt to put us off course. My attitude led to a major confrontation with Prime Minister Pearson, in which I expressed my anger and indignation. I had good reason to be angry and indignant. I was blindsided by my colleagues. Alan Jay wrote a letter to Prime Minister Pearson, expressing his frustration in defending Medicare. Years later, he said this: "It was destined to be the toughest letter I ever wrote to any Prime Minister I served, and today, all these years later, I wouldn't change a word." Shelving Medicare indefinitely was out of the question. If Medicare went down to a humiliating defeat, I went down with it, or so I reasoned at the time. The struggle for Medicare fought 3 decades ago was a struggle for our identity as Canadians. In many ways, it has proven to be the biggest spike in the Canadian national dream. At the time of its enactment, Alan McEachran, more than anyone else, had the hammer in his hand. Medicare became the most successful regional development program ever established. His legacy survives not only in his memoirs, but in the lives Canadians live every day.
Lots of people in federal politics believed in universal health care. Alan J. McEachran made it happen.